What do we see in Genesis chapter 1? And it was good. And it was good. He made the light and it was good. So we learn that God makes good things. We learn that God not only is powerful enough to create the world, but he's in control of the world. He forms the world. He's wise enough to form it in a logical way, and he's in control of it. Humans were created with a fellowship towards God. Sin separates us from God. That's no less than the gospel message. We find the beginnings of it back here in Genesis. God will judge sin. We see that over and over again, just in the first handful of chapters. We see the doctrine of grace. We see even as early as Adam and Eve, when they sin, God judges them by putting them out of the garden, but he clothes them with animal skins. So we see both God's wrath and his love all the way back here in the Garden of Eden. The doctrine of faith, Abraham believed God and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Genesis 15:6 is no less than the cornerstone of our faith. Paul quotes that over in Romans chapter 5. So no less than the central core of the gospel message, where mankind was separated from God through sin, but reconciled through Jesus Christ. The critical parts of that are way back here in Genesis. The promise of a deliverer, major theological theme throughout Scripture. Quote, he shall crush your head and he shall bruise your heel in Genesis 3:15, talking about the serpent causing the sin, but yet Jesus Christ is going to reconcile back again. The seed of Abraham, unto thy seed I will give this land, Genesis 12:7. So we have these wonderful promises that were given all the way back to Adam and Eve, all the way back to Abraham, that are major doctrinal themes that play out through the New Testament. The idea that God's going to test our faith. We see that in the story of God commanding Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Are we going to believe God or not? And are we going to follow his commands or not? Besides these theological aspects, these doctrinal things, the story in Genesis is one of the all-time great stories, all-time great pieces of literature in all of mankind. The story of when Joseph was sold by his brothers and was locked in a prison unnecessarily, but God was providentially using that. It's just a great story. It's just a great literature. Skeptics and the critics will just wave a hand and say, oh, Genesis is just one more of many creation myths, just like a lot of other ancient myths. There's a lot of ancient myths on how the world came to be, and that's just one more fantastic story. Well, Steve, I'm convinced that people that make those claims, that I don't think they read Genesis, and I don't think they read the other creation myths, because if they did, they would see some vast differences. In the creation myths of the ancient Near East and the ancient world, these had stories of how the gods came to be God. They had stories of these gods would be struggling or fighting with each other, or the gods would have some sort of sexual union with each other, and that would generate the world, or the things, the trees and the rest of creation came about through some interaction between these gods. There was a process for how the world came to be. We don't see any of that in Genesis. What we see is God said, "Let there be," and it was so. So in Genesis, there's really no process here at all. It's just in the beginning, God created it and he said, let it happen. And it was there. So we have God speaking things into existence, vast different from the creation myths and the origin of God myths that we find in the ancient world.
Glenn, I'm glad that you're making that clarification, because several times earlier, you mentioned the word literature and said literature. But as you're talking about that, you're talking about this as being that the prose that is there, the way that it's put together and the way that it's structured in a literary style tells us that this is something that's much deeper than some work of fiction or some mythological documentation. So I'm glad you're making that distinction between the two. That's what you really mean by literature, that it has been documented in such a way that it's very concise and precise, and it gives us so much information out of it, but it is no way a mythological story.
Yeah, when I say literature, contrast that to, say, the dictionary, right? The dictionary is true. Everything in a good dictionary, it's all factually true. It's just not a very interesting read, right? You don't start at the A's and read through to the B's and the C's. I mean, it's just not a very good story. Genesis is a wonderful story. It just reads well. It's engrossing. There's plot twists. There's these dramatic things where we can see ourselves in it, things like that.